Hello, everyone. I just wanted to make a brief video talking about questions or prompts for the first essay. You have a choice here between two of I would say, the two major issues involving the first part of the course. The first one has to do with the Epicurean conclusion that it makes absolutely no sense to say that death is a bad thing for the person who dies. And the whole point of Nagel's essay Death is to refute that. The second is about the asymmetry problem, what it is, and what the proposed solution is in Bruckner and Fisher's Why is Death Bad? Let's just talk a little bit about what the successful essays will do with these questions. Let's look at the first one. First of all, it's got two parts, right? The first part, actually, it doesn't have two parts. It's one question, I'm sorry, more or less. And that is whether Nagel really did refute the Epicurean claim that death can't be bad for the one who dies. This would really take a fairly strong grasp of what Nagel was up to in his essay, and an ability to evaluate it. The question asked, was he successful in what he set out to do? Which means you basically have to do two things. One is to set out what he actually did, what his argument was in Why is Death Bad? And secondly, to evaluate that argument. So to really be a successful essay, it would have to do both of those things. That is, to show, to give a clear account of what Nagel was doing to try to establish that death could be considered a bad for the one who dies. And secondly, to give some kind of evaluation of it, some critique of it. Was it a good argument? Did he actually refute Epicurus's claim? And that would, of course, take, too, a good, strong grasp of what Epicurus's claim actually was, what the basis of it was. So I think that you have to take into account what Epicurus's reasons were for his conclusion that death could never be considered a bad for the one who dies, and whether or not Nagel really overcame that. Now, of course, Nagel does not mention Epicurus, I think, by name. He may never have read Epicurus, but whether he knows it or not, what he's arguing against is the Epicurean position. So the way I've structured the question, you really have to take into account what Epicurus said. Second question, the second option, remember, you're only doing one of these, is about the asymmetry problem. Did Bruckner and Fisher solve the asymmetry problem? Why or why not? So again, very similar in structure to the first question. It asks you explicitly to evaluate the success of an argument. And that argument is Bruckner and Fisher's argument in which they propose a solution to the asymmetry problem. To really address this successfully, you have to know what I mean, at least, by a solution, a so-called solution to the asymmetry problem. And I think that watching the video that I devote to simply the asymmetry problem, what kind of problem it is and what it would mean to solve it is pretty key there. So unless you've watched that video and have a notion of what I'm getting at, I would say don't choose this. What is the asymmetry problem, and what would a solution to it be? That you simply have to have a pretty clear idea of what that would mean in general before you can actually evaluate any particular attempt to solve it, which is what Bruckner and Fisher do. I'll just tell you that unless you've read to the end, unless you've read the third section, I believe, or the last section at least, of the thing which is entitled Why Death is Bad, then you can't address this problem. That is, it has to take into account the latter part of the essay in which they actually propose, what a successful solution would be. And remember that they're working with Derek Parfit's work, his hypotheticals, and the first one involving the person who is wondering whether they will have or already have had a painful operation. Although it's enlightening about the temporal bias we have towards bads, it doesn't, in their mind, solve the problem for reasons that they give. So can't simply give me a little bit of what's going on in Bruckner and Fisher, and then, no, it has to be their actual solution, which is, again, presented at the end of the essay. So you've got, 2 or 3 pages here, 500 to 750 words, which is not a lot. But I think enough. In a short essay like this, you want to get straight to the point. There really isn't a lot of room for anything that doesn't directly relate to the question asked. And one of the pitfalls you want to avoid is simply giving a generic or general account of the essay without focusing on this, what's specifically asked for in the question. So one of the things you're really being evaluated on is the relevance of the material that you discuss. If you're discussing aspects of the essay that do not directly relate to the question, or if you discuss aspects of the essay and don't explain why they directly relate to the question asked, then that's a problem with the essay. So you want to definitely read, understand, and focus on answering the particular question asked.